I'm Colt Stevens from C. Stevens Gunworks, and today we're going to be talking about the prerequisites to getting your FFL. This video is intended to be your first steps into starting a gun business from ground zero. But first, let's talk about the federal firearms license itself. You really need this license in order to do anything firearms related in regards to a business. If you don't have a federal firearms license, you can't sell guns over state lines. You can sell guns inside state lines, but there are very specific requirements for what constitutes business application and what constitutes personal sale. If you cross the line as far as the ATF is concerned, they can go after you for not having a federal firearms license. So it's really important that if you're going to do any kind of transactions, at least on a repetitive basis, or such as if you keep records of your cost for guns, like if you maintain a spreadsheet, anything like that, that could be considered business use for firearms. So the federal firearms license really opens up a lot of doors for you, and it's really important to have. It's really critical. You can't operate a gun business unless you have a federal firearms license. So what is this video going to cover? Well, I'm going to tell you exactly what I've done so far. I have filed with the Secretary of State in Tennessee as an LLC. We'll talk a little bit more about that. The thing I did after that was I got an EIN from the IRS, an employee identification number. That's important for your tax filing at the end of the year. And then third, I got a business license in the county in which I reside and also where this business is going to take place, that allows me to conduct business in this county. The fourth thing that we will talk about later is zoning. In this case, this being a home-based business, there is no zoning requirements. At least in this county, your county may be different. And then finally, the last hurdle I have for the federal firearms license is to be fingerprinted. Personally, I have electronic fingerprint files from submitting Form 4s for suppressors, short barrel rifles, anything NFA related. But the ATF, at least for federal firearms licenses, does not accept electronic files. They need a physical card. Now, in this county, people are not really used to doing fingerprint cards, especially for this purpose. I called and they didn't really know what to do for this. So that's my last hurdle. I have to call them next week. So that's kind of the roadblock and where I'm stuck right now in the process. Once I have that card, I will have done everything as far as prerequisites for the federal firearms license, and then I can move forward. So let's get into it. Let's start with step one. If you're wanting to enter the firearms industry and you haven't done anything so far, this video is for you. The very first thing you want to do is, in whichever state you reside, this specific channel is for Tennessee. C. Stevens Gunworks is incorporated in Tennessee. The first thing you need to do is actually register your business. That's through the Secretary of State of whichever state you reside in. That I did through the Tennessee Secretary of State website. I think it's TNSOS is what they call it. In this state, it's $300 per year to file your business, and when you do your taxes, I believe you also have to pay $300 yearly to re-up. And this allows you to file with the Department of Revenue and pay your business taxes. Now, there's multiple ways you could go about filing with the Secretary of State, and you might ask why this is necessary in the first place. Well, specifically for the gun industry, you are liable for a lot of different ways of being sued. We'll probably talk more about this in a different video, but even if you sell a perfectly functional product, you can still be sued for the use of that product, in this case firearms, if somebody uses a product harmfully. There was a big lawsuit involving Remington in the last few years where someone used their product illegally and they were sued. There was nothing wrong with the product itself, the firearm, mechanically, but because someone used their product illegally, they were found to be at fault for it, which is a very dangerous precedent for firearms manufacturers, stores, etc. Anybody in the gun industry is really affected by that. So it's really important when you are starting your business from the ground up, especially, that you take steps in your corporate structure to protect yourself from liability. So in this case, when you register with the Secretary of State, they ask you, what is your corporate structure like? So a limited liability corporation is really the best choice if you're starting from scratch, just right out of the gate. So what does this do? The limited liability corporation is really a separate entity from yourself. So there is you as an individual, and there is the corporation, your business. If you have a liability or are sued as a result of something that happened in the business, they can only come after your limited liability corporation, not you personally. So say that you got sued in the course of business in the firearms industry. The limited liability corporation shields your personal assets from being in the line of fire, so to speak, from your lawsuit. So let's say you have a house, you have a car, you have investments. If they're all held personally and separate from the LLC, they cannot target those assets. In your limited liability corporation, this is kind of like a protective shield around yourself. They can only come after what's in the LLC or what's owned by the LLC because it's a separate entity from yourself. So that's really critical, because in the course of business and being in the firearms industry, you are open to a lot of liability, and there's not a whole lot you can protect yourself from being sued. At the end of the day, if somebody really has a problem, they're going to find a way to sue you. So the LLC is really a critical step. You really got to have that if you're going to be in the firearms industry. So there are other corporate structures you could consider, but LLCs is really the simplest, most concise way to get started, at least. So that's what we'll be going with here at C. Stevens Gunworks. I've already filed the business as an LLC, and we are registered with the Tennessee Secretary of State. So to complete that, you really, just like I said, you go to the TNSOS portal. You fill out your address. They'll ask you some questions about your corporate structure. In this case, it's an LLC. At this point, they don't need an EIN. That's the next step. So this is really your first step from nothing as far as the business is concerned. You need to file with your state. And this, for the most part, is all you have to do for a state level compliance with your laws. Now, county and federal are coming up next. But once you do that, I believe it's $300, at least in Tennessee, every year to continue to file as a business and keep it up. So that is the LLC portion. So that's step one. The next step is to do the EIN, the employer identification. That's the federal level. And this is really simple. This doesn't cost you anything. You go to the irs.gov and request a free EIN. This is important because you need to have this for your business license. You'll also need this for your FFL, especially if you ever get a SOT for your FFL, special occupancy taxpayer. They will have to have this number. So the EIN is really critical. Anytime you file your taxes as a business, especially if you're going to do it separate from your personal, you file under the EIN. It's just kind of a way to tell the IRS that your social security number or other EIN, if you have a personal EIN number, is separate from the business EIN. And you'll also eventually need to get a separate bank account, and you will need this EIN to start that bank account as well. So this is very important that you have an EIN. And it took me like, I don't know, 5 to 10 minutes to get an EIN to start with. So it's very easy. In this case, you just go to the irs.gov website. I believe they'll ask you for your social security number. If you're filing as an LLC, which I did, they wanted to know that I was the sole member, so I was really the only person involved with it. I was both the director, the sole member, and a responsible party. That's the things that they ask you, which I am all three of those because I'm the only person involved in the business legally. So once you have the EIN, that really opens up some more doors, and that's also part of being federally compliant with your business. That's letting the IRS know that you can intend to conduct business and that you will be filing taxes under this business separately. Okay, so here's the third step. The third step is your county business license. So, in contrast to the other two, this is something that you have to have the steps 1 and 2 done first. So, what I did was I printed off my confirmation that I was assigned an IRS EIN, and I printed off my payment of registration for the Secretary of State for Tennessee. I took both of those to my county clerk's office and I said, I need a business license for my business, C. Stevens Gunworks LLC. Um, and it's also important that you mention that your business is an LLC so everybody knows that you are registered as an LLC. I think you have to, anywhere that it's advertised that you have a business, your business name, you have to have the LLC portion on at the end of your name. So anyway, I showed them that at the county clerk's office, said I needed a business license. They asked me, do I want a minimal activity business license or a standard business license? And so the difference, at least here in this county in Tennessee, is if you do 100,000 or less annually in gross receipts, which means total sales, not profit, just total sales, you can do a minimal business license. What that means is that you deal more directly with the county as opposed to the state, as far as filing your taxes, and I believe some of your payments may go through the county as well when you file your taxes. There was another gentleman when I was in there, he had mistakenly got a standard business license, did not qualify for over 100,000, and he had to do a lot of his reporting through the state, which kind of complicated it because he had to go back and forth with both Nashville and Knoxville to get his taxes filed, and it was kind of a jumbled mess. And that's, at least if you're doing less than 100,000 in business, the minimal business license just simplifies it a lot. So just to get off the ground, especially if you don't have a lot of money in inventory, I would recommend the minimal. And I don't know if every state is like that where they have two different classes of business license. That's something you'd have to check on your own. But at least in Tennessee, this is what I'd recommend. And that's what we did here. So this is the stage at which I'm at right now with the business. So I have messaged our area zoning office, and they have not reached back out to me. It's been 3 days since I've messaged them. I don't believe, based on everything that I've gathered, and I also talked to the county clerk's office, and they said that there's no specific zoning requirements for a home-based business, including an FFL, and I did mention that specifically to make sure. The ATF requires that you have in writing that you are in compliance with your zoning ordinances. So until I have a message that says I don't have to do anything, it doesn't matter if it's verbal, I have to have it written to show the ATF when they examine the license application that I am in compliance with the zoning ordinance. So that's one roadblock that I can't get past right now until I talk to someone at zoning. But I don't anticipate that being anything huge. I'm really just waiting for an email from anybody at the county level that can answer that for me. I don't think that's a huge thing. So what's after zoning? So the last step before I can actually submit my federal firearms application is I need to be fingerprinted. And I said a little bit earlier, so I have personal electronic fingerprints, but I need fingerprint cards. I believe in this case I only need one fingerprint card physically to mail in with my application. For federal firearms license applications, they do not accept electronic filing, so I physically have to mail it to the ATF, the Federal Firearms Licensing Center. So I called the sheriff's office. They directed me to the local jail, and when I talked to them, they had acted like they had never heard of anybody applying for a federal firearms license before. So they told me they were busy and I needed to call them back on Monday. Well, I called them on Thursday last week. That's when I started this. And so Monday, that really slows it down by 4 days. So Until I can get fingerprinted, I'm at a direct stop for now. It doesn't matter what county or sheriff's office or really any agency does your fingerprint cards. So I could go to any sheriff's office, get my fingerprint cards, as long as I have a physical card I can mail in. So that's up to date where I am right now. So to summarize, we started with the Secretary of State filing. We got our IRS EIN number. We got our county business license. Waiting to hear on zoning, waiting on fingerprint card. Once you have those 5 things, you're ready to submit your federal firearms application. So looking forward, what does the federal firearms application process consist of? So you need to submit the paperwork. I believe it's a Form 7. You have to pay for, whether you're just a dealer for firearms, I think it's $200 every 3 years. So like $67 a year, which is really not that much. That's pretty affordable. Where it gets to be more money is if you get your special occupancy taxpayer status, which is for suppressors, machine guns, short barrel rifles, any other weapons, destructive devices. That requires $500 per year. That is separate from the FFL. I don't think you file that on the Form 7. It's kind of like an add-on. You can pay that at any time, and then like 30 days later, they'll issue your SOT addition to your FFL. And that it's important to know that goes from June to June every year. So let's say you file in December, you're still paying $500 and only getting half the use out of your SOT. They don't prorate it in any way. So if you're considering adding the SOT to your license, it's good to do it in June. That's part of the reason that I chose to start the business in May, so that by the time I have everything lined up, it'll be a little bit past June and I'll get the full amount of use out of that license for the same fee. So it's a great time to file if you're looking to start your business in the gun industry now. So that's really all there is if you're going from 0 to pre-FFL stage. This is everything I've done. This is where we're at. This is up to date with where we are at with the business. So like I've said in our introductory video, I still have Gunbroker and eBay accounts set up already. As long as I don't sell firearms, I am still good as far as the ATF is concerned. But if I want to take it to an actual gun store, I will need that federal firearms license. Legally, I can conduct business for anything else, as far as ammunition, sporting goods, holsters, in this case coins. I have plenty of coins. All of that is able to be sold without a federal firearms license. Now that I have the EIN and the business license, I am recognized as a business entity, and I will transition everything over to the LLC, including with a new bank account for tax filing purposes, filing taxes under the EIN. And that lets me take advantage of the limited liability corporation for reducing my liability. So this has been our first steps on the way to getting our FFL. I appreciate you watching. If you have any questions, feel free to leave me a comment. I'd love to have a discussion with you about it. If you're enjoying the channel so far, I encourage you to subscribe to our channel, and we will have more videos coming soon. Thank you very much for watching.